gone forth from him. Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" His disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in, fear and trembling, fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." I love coming to Scripture at different times in my life and seeing how it speaks differently to me during different time periods. I wrote a paper on this specific text in seminary, and I said that it was not a good text to preach on because of the complexity of the intersectionality of the woman, and a simple sermon could not do the full story justice. I still find this true, but when I was seeking text for a sermon this week to follow up our sermon series of 40 Forward, I knew we needed something that talked about someone being bold and having courage going forward. So I Googled it. Scriptures about courage. Scriptures about being bold. And there just really wasn't anything that spoke to me. Great scriptures, but nothing that jumped out. And as I sat and thought, this story suddenly jumped into my head. And what a story of boldness and courage. And that's one of those things that I love about Scripture, is that it is living and ever developing and ever inspiring. And sometimes these old stories that we've heard over and over again, they end up bringing new life when we engage them in new ways at different times in our life. So although I still think that this scripture is an important one to talk about in small groups, I'm going to invite us today to engage it together with an open heart, an open mind, with new ears and new eyes, and to seek the inspiration that comes from this story. And I pray that God may reveal God's self through this scripture to us in wholly new ways. This woman was bold in her actions. She had this bleeding for 12 years, and it could have been anything from a simple cut to something much more serious. But either way, she had it for 12 years. Suffered with this thing that caused her to live on the outside of society because of the purity laws of the time. She would have been considered to be impure, and anybody who would come in contact with her would have to go through purity rituals to be able to re-engage the community. How isolating those 12 years had to be. As she sat alone on the outside of society, she spent all of her treasure seeking solutions, going to doctors, trying to find things that would help heal her. And finally, she realized that the only thing left was to be bold. In her bold actions, she had to have hope that it would work. There was nowhere else to turn. When desperation was all that she knew, hope was still there. Hope inspired her bold actions. Hope inspires a lot of great things that God does in this world. There is a program that is called Hope Partnership that goes around through different churches. They're part of the Disciples of Christ, part of our denomination, and they go around and help churches seek out hope. They go to small congregations that are not thriving, congregations that feel like there is little hope left, congregations that are full of desperation and don't know how to be bold. And they have some very hard conversations with these churches. And they present different options. And one of those options, although all of them are holy options, options that help to continue to share the good news of God, sometimes those options lead to really amazing things. There are two churches in this area who have gone through the Hope Partnership program, Midway Hills Christian Church in Dallas and Casa View Christian Church, which is also in far east Dallas. Both of them were at points where they were ready to close their doors, where they didn't know how to be bold anymore. And this group came in and gave them hope. And these are now congregations that act boldly each and every day. These are congregations that live in the community and share the good news with the people who surround them and fill people with hope, with the good news of God. Sometimes when we get to that low point, when we don't know where to turn, we have to have hope to inspire us to be bold, to inspire us to have courage. This woman also had courage because she knew immediately after she had touched Jesus' cloak that she was healed. And Jesus knew it too. And even though he was in a crowd, he said, "Who touched me? Who did this?" And the disciples, who in the Gospel of Mark are usually a little clueless, the disciples are like, "Jesus, we're in a huge crowd. Why would you ask this question? It could have been anyone." And although this woman could have gone away, blended in with the crowd, and been healed and continued to live her life, she found the courage to speak up. She came to him filled with fear and trembling. And when we see people engage things with fear and trembling, it is not out of weakness or being scared. In Scripture, often it is recognizing that we are encountering divine power. So in our story, our woman is encountering Jesus and his goodness, his holiness, his connection to God. She recognizes God's presence with Jesus. And I can only imagine the courage that it took her to step up to him and say, "It was me." She had to have so much doubt and worry. Jesus could have shamed her, could have thrown her to the side, could have done horrible, awful things. But he didn't. He embraced her. Not only did he embrace her, he empowered her. He said, "You know what, daughter," embracing her, welcoming her into this new family, a family of God, of God's love, this new family that was a unique family. Whereas her biological family may have left her a long time ago, alone on the edge of society with her sickness. Jesus welcomed her by calling her daughter, and he told her to go. To go. Go to be with the people, to go into the community, to go and share the good news of what just happened. Jesus didn't just heal her, didn't just welcome her, but he told her, he empowered her to go and spread the good news. And all of this because of faith. He said, "Your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed." This woman may have come from a place of desperation, but her bold acts of courage, her hope, her faith paid off. She was welcomed into this new, unique family of God. She was healed. She was loved. And she was empowered to share the good news with others. It doesn't take a lot of faith, just a small amount of faith, and great things can happen. So are we to see ourselves as a church in the role of the woman? Do we feel like we might be at a place where no hope is left? Do we feel like for the last 12 years we have been suffering and struggling? Maybe it's just a symbolic 12 years. Do we feel like maybe we have exhausted all of our resources just like this woman? And if we are to put ourselves in the place of this woman, how do we act boldly? How do we build up the courage to encounter God and share the good news of God with others? How do we take that empowerment from Jesus and spread the good news in our community? How do we take our faith in Jesus and seek healing and wholeness? Or are we to see ourselves as Jesus? The ones who embrace the outsider, who provide the healing and the comfort. Those who empower others to go, to be at peace, to be in the world. Maybe this isn't an either-or kind of moment, but a chance to identify as both. A chance to recognize that there is a dance between being the woman and being Jesus. We have times that we have to be filled with courage and to act boldly so we can in turn reflect the message of Jesus in embracing others. When we become comfortable, we are rarely forced to act in bold ways. Therefore, we rarely live out the gospel fully. When we focus on the goodness that is Jesus, we are open to doing new things, to having bold faith. We can be filled with courage when we open ourselves